Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Pastor and the Pappy. That's when you put a 1 next to a 1 and they look at each other and say, you look like me.
It's also a Roman numeral 2.
Welcome to episode Roman numeral 2, titled Catholic and Other Guilt. The Pastor and the Pappy is this podcast in which two guys, one pastor, one pappy, talk about God and their walks with God.
The Pastor
and the Pappy.
How you doing there, Douglas?
I am doing good, bud, except I'm angry at Skype again.
Why? What did it do?
So you sign in, and for a while my computer's been telling me there's a problem with your Microsoft Outlook account, which I don't even use, So it's all the junk that Windows feels like it must make us dependent upon, So finally I changed my password on that and got it all set up. Well, then I couldn't log into Skype. And I just changed my Skype password Sunday night because I was recording with some guys. And, so I had to go through it all day. I was going through it again. And suddenly it dawned on me, why don't you just try the password? Because I was like, I know this is the right password. So I put in the password that I changed Windows Outlook to, and apparently they're the same. So apparently Skype and Windows are connected, and nobody told me, and it's the same password for both. And then, of course, Skype has to update, and it's just I wish I could get a hold of them and say, listen, Skype security is not the most critical issue in my life.
You've mentioned
nobody's
that before.
Gonna hack. Yeah, it's because it always comes. Like I knew today, I started the computer 3 hours early because I knew something like that would happen. And I wanted to be ready for us to record. So other than being angry at the unreasonableness of Skype / Microsoft / anybody that's got passwords on the most insipid things on the internet. My bank has to have a good password. My guitar tab program does not have to have a good password.
Well, you're using the same one. Now, when you type in, I love the Wiggles, are you using a capital L and a capital W?
Oh, is that what the problem is?
Yeah, because
it's not the Wiggles. It's Barney. I should should capitalize the B.
That's
Teletubbies. Teletubbies forever. The 4 is actually the numeral 4. And
not FORE. That
not FOUR, but the numeral 4.
Yeah, Skype has been updating and being stupid. You and I both have Zoom now. And my buddy Ferg and I have Zoom, so we could try it. But since we're kicking already, next time, I guess.
Well, and I think I've said before, I look much better on Zoom. I thought I was much handsomer.
That's true. You have said that.
On Zoom, so maybe we got to try it. But nothing's going to help me today. I got my hair cut, and I love this wonderful Korean lady that cuts my hair, but I always tell her, leave it long on top, and she doesn't really do that, and I come out looking like what I call the pencil head. Because I think my head looks like the top of a pencil with the eraser and everything.
It actually does.
And yeah, thanks for confirming that. I mean, so maybe it's a good thing we're not on Zoom. Maybe
got a little Tintin going on there.
Yeah, so that's a little too short. So,
well, if it's any consolation, I am late as usual. 20 minutes this time. Last time it was what?
It was about an hour last time.
Yeah,
you were
I'm sorry. I gotta work on my afternoon naps, and this time I fell asleep in the recliner, like all good men about to reach their 50s do, after a big meal, which was 2 sausage and egg biscuits.
Oh my goodness! You're gonna be dead in 6 weeks.
This is something I do every Sunday and Wednesday. Sausage, egg, and cheese.
You're gonna be dead in 3 weeks.
Yeah, better knock that down in the minutes. I can feel do you smell toast right now? No.
I do not on my end, unfortunately. I neither get the aromas from your kitchen nor the sausage biscuits themselves. So,
well, I want to.
I'm cheated all around.
Cheetos? Did you say Cheetos?
No, cheated.
Oh, cheated. Sorry.
Speaking of Cheetos, though, hey, what's the Cheetos mascot? Chester Cheetah, Charlie Cheetah? When did he become such a jerk? Because in the 80s, he was like this cool, fun-loving, skateboard guy. Yeah, and now he's like this British guy that just says mean things to people.
It could be a conglomerate, like Britain came in and helped them out financially and says, look, we let you go ahead and do what you want, but you're going to have to change Cheetah to someone from our neighborhood.
Maybe, yeah. That's how they're getting the British Film Board dollars for their advertising. But I don't know what marketer said, you know what, we've got the outrageous extreme Chester Cheetah. Let's just turn him into the European jackwagon and see how that sells cheese snacks for us.
I only like my Cheetos in the Cheez-Its, the double cheese pack where it comes with those little tiny, what do you call Melba toasts? The little tiny Melba toasts. And then
the little, I call them little bagels, but I guess they're not bagels. They're they're more Melbas,
like and then pretzels, and then Cheez-Its, and then Cheetos mixed in there. Oh man, that's perfect movie food.
You know what I like, but I haven't had for years. Do you like putting Cheetos, or Doritos is even better, but Cheetos work? Put Cheetos on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
No,
like just right in the middle. You
sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, put peanut butter on one side, jelly on the other, and then you smash your Cheetos in there.
I hammer up Doritos and I sprinkle them on the hot dogs.
I like to coat Doritos in mustard for some strange reason.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, it gives it a good, what to me is a good flavor. It's probably some chemical reaction that I'm producing.
Let's go ahead and have a lunch break. We'll come back in about it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Well, tonight we're going to talk about Catholic and other guilt. I myself have been born and raised Catholic. I'm not good at it. And that's one of my guilts. It's because I have no clue who begat who. And I really don't plan on ever learning who begat who or why the word begat exists. And that's one of my guilts.
It's also our cultural artifact for this episode.
Let's kick that puppy. And now it's time for the cultural artifact. Cultural artifact is a current event or an incident which connects in some ways with our walks with God.
Yeah, so once again, the cultural artifact comes via moi. I stumbled across this. Well, we had just recorded.
French for me. Sorry, go ahead.
French for me. That's my attempt to, sound intellectual. All I can do from my 3 years of French is 3 years of high school French. I could say, "Give me the cheese." I think I could say that. Donnez-moi le fromage. I think is
fromage is
correct.
Cheese. Wow,
fromage. Yeah,
that's sexy.
Donnez-moi. So, no. In any case, I was surfing the net. I can't remember what I was doing after we recorded our last episode. It was right after we recorded our last episode, which we did get some feedback on.
Oh, good. I can't wait to hear. But go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to come back to that, but so it was real quickly after our last episode. Something on the internet, some article I was reading, said something about Catholic guilt. And I had heard that phrase before. Now, I can't remember exactly what it was I was looking at. I can't remember what article it was that used that term. But if you just search Catholic guilt on Google, the first thing that comes up is a Wikipedia page, which I'm always astounded by what has its own Wikipedia page. But Catholic guilt has its own Wikipedia page. They give a little blurb at the top. They say Catholic guilt is an expression used to identify the reported excess guilt felt by Catholics and lapsed Catholics. Then there's an Urban Dictionary.
I'm a lapsed Catholic.
Are you a lapsed or a relapsed Catholic?
I've run around it so many times. I think I've done enough laps around Catholic.
What's the difference between lapsed and relapsed?
I think lapsed Catholic is somebody that is maybe a big guest, but somebody who, like me, is just wavering in and out of Catholicism.
Okay.
And then relapsed would be somebody who must have come back and then taken off and then come back again. Yeah,
I guess I thought maybe it was like flammable and inflammable. They really mean
the same thing, yeah.
Regardless and irregardless, I don't know. But next, 21 signs you suffer from Catholic guilt. Maybe we ought to put you through that test. I don't know.
I would love it.
The end of Catholic guilt is a New York Times article, just today, I guess, in fact. Or no, it's dated Saturday. It hasn't even come out yet. Oh, no, that's 2016, not 2017. Okay. I'm in the right. So that's almost a year old.
Future predictor.
Yeah, there you go. What is Catholic guilt from a place called Wise Geek? The difference between Catholic and Jewish guilt from Pacific Standard magazine. Then the memes start. And so we've got the one meme that's got that picture of Boromir from Lord of the Rings, and it's going like where he says one does not simply walk into Mordor, and this one says one simply does not get over Catholic guilt, So we have a lot of references. Probably my first, when I traced across this a couple of weeks ago after our last episode, it was not my first exposure to the idea. My first exposure to the idea was a discussion in Marvel Comics as to what religion the various heroes were, and somebody said Spider-Man, even though I think Daredevil is overtly Catholic. Somebody said Spider-Man must be Catholic because he suffers that sense of guilt over the death of his Uncle Ben, So I was aware of this idea of Catholic guilt. Oh, also, when Heather and I took a bus tour of the city, San Francisco, and our driver, I believe, was Filipino. The Filipinos are Asian, but they have Spanish names because they were colonized by the Spanish. So you'll have these Asian people with Spanish names, and I think his name was Jose or something. He was telling all these terrible jokes. And he told some joke, something about the difference between Presbyterians and Catholics, and the punchline was that Catholics get the guilt. So I've heard this idea of Catholic guilt. I probably have an equivalent, or people think I have an equivalent as a Protestant Christian. But before we get into that, I'm just interested in hearing because you jumped on this real quick. When I foxed you and said, hey, let's do Catholic guilt, you were like, boom, that's our next culture artifact. So let me get some of your input. The articles that we've referenced here, the memes and all, that's just the launching pad for where we want to get here. The real idea is just this Catholic guilt phrase and concept, which is such a phrase and concept in our society. What is your opinion on it? What are your thoughts about it? Real or not real? Take it away.
I don't think it's so much. Yeah, it's a good question. Real or not real? I never even thought about the possibility of it not being real. There's a lot of guilt in the Catholicism religion because of how much there is that you must do. And anyone that can pull that off, kudos to you. I cannot. There is so much to do. You have to pray every night a certain way and a certain amount of prayers, and then you have to do the rosary a certain way, and with a group of no more than 10 or less. I'm making that up, but there's all of those rules that come with things. These 12 stations of the cross that you have to know, and know the prayers that surround that. I was talking with my buddy Phil about during the Mass, we do the small cross on the forehead, the small cross on the mouth, and the small cross over the heart during a reading of the Gospel of Luke, or the reading of the Gospel of Paul, or the reading of Gospel of other people I can't even think of. And that all leads to, since I don't know what those things are, you start to feel guilty because you're supposed to, because you're Catholic. You are supposed to know that. I still haven't gotten confirmed Catholic yet. And all of those items together can give you that guilty feeling that you're not a good Catholic. Therefore, you're not a good believer in the way that you're supposed to believe in God, which can really be a lot of pressure. And that's one of the things that keeps me from going deeper into confirmation and a set religion like Catholicism, just because of how many rules there are that can keep your time suspended in this guilt instead of actually enjoying what you're given and being thankful for what you have. And you can easily get off track with the guilt side of it, and then it just pushes you away completely. if it gets to be too thick of a thing, you can just be like, you know what, I give up. That's too much for me to worry about. And you look at people like George Carlin. He was Catholic, and then he reached a point where it was just like, you know what, this is crap. Now, whether it was a personal belief in his head or a wake-up point for him where he felt that this is not needed in my life, or was it the fact that there was so many items that just kept pouring on top of him, and he's like, I can't do this, and then he's just like, you know what, this is too much, I don't get it, I'm out. I think that becomes a factor with Catholic guilt as well. Personally, that's something I believe. There's a lot of Carlin fans out there be like, you're full of crap, man. Hey, that's what I believe. That it's just sometimes it can be way overbearing, and that's just the Catholic side of it. Other religion guilts, I would think, would have the same premise where it's just too much to take in, and time goes by, and you reach an age like I am now, and you get so set in your ways that you're not about to go backwards and check, unless you're trying to become a priest or something. But, you don't want to go back and redo all of that again just to have it, unless it's something that you definitely want to dedicate your life to doing, because being a very good Catholic is a lifelong commitment kind of thing, where you're just constantly learning and constantly going deeper into all the levels of being a Catholic. And that's just, me personally, I used to have a lot of guilt with that, especially in my 20s and 30s, just because it's like, oh, time's getting by and I haven't gotten confirmed yet. I need to do that. And then I would stop and think, well, why do I need to do that to be close to God? And why do I need to have the knowledge of Sebastrobatum is begat by Somalius, and all of that? Why do I need all that in my head when it's nice to know, and if I knew the history, but at the same time, it's just taking away the time that I could be enjoying my life with God without having to worry about all the things that I'm not going to really be tested on, I hope, when I go. I'm not going to be up there going, all right, who begat who before you come on in? I hope that doesn't happen, because I don't have the answers. And so all that just adds up to that guilt kind of sense.
Okay, so for you, you're saying a couple things. I mean, you're saying, A, you believe it's a very real thing. Mm-hmm. So you really do feel a sense of guilt associated with your walk with God, or the way in which you're going about your walk with God. And then B, I guess that's the B there, that this guilt is based on certain religious practices and a certain conception of those who keep or don't keep those practices. So,
right.
That's pretty much your answer. So first of all, let me do a couple of things with that. First of all, you did mention other religious guilt, and we even put that in the title. The one article we saw mentioned Jewish guilt. A lot of people tend to think that I experience a lot of guilt as well. I don't know if the term Protestant guilt is a thing, but certainly the idea has been out there. And so one story that I had, and I want to tell you this story, it's a little mature. I don't think it's going to get us a dirty tag on iTunes. I don't think we're going to lose our clean tag here, but using a term I don't use much. But my friend told me about I don't know what you want to call it. There was a speaker that came to his school when he was in college, and Christian speaker, and some opposition. There was opposition, people that oppose that, not just aren't in the faith but oppose it, showed up and tried to challenge this guy at the question and answer session. And one of the guys stands up and he says, I don't understand why you Christians are so repressed when it comes to sex. And he said, I masturbate all the time. And the guy, so that was his question, that was his statement. And the guy responded to me, said, well, thanks for stopping long enough to be with us today.
I like that.
Which I just think is classic, So sorry if that term is a little too risque for anybody. But you do see in that, his perception of us, not just the Catholics, but the Protestants as well, was that you're repressed, which would be another term for this, or you feel some sort of guilt because you're not doing something, or you're doing something poorly. So I guess that is I guess that is a real thing. I mean, you're saying it's real.
I think it's
You're
real,
saying
definitely with the Catholic religion itself, and where the term Catholic guilt comes from is, at least for me, it's the fact that there will always be that little Catholic guilt that I was brought up a certain way, and for lack of better choice, except Carlin went extremely the opposite way. But like Carlin, I reached a certain age where it's just like, I don't think I need all of this Catholic stuff to be a good person. And I always felt that there's a little bit of a guilt to that. I don't know how to explain that guilt, but I've always felt like that was a little too much pressure on a human being to be that close to a form of religion. To me, I think that there's a straighter connection to God than having to follow the religion that I was born into. If that makes sense.
I think so. Yeah, I think so as well. And I think that's actually the solution to our problem here. But as we begin to solve that problem, we are really moving into the territory of the spiritual application.
And now it's time for the spiritual application. Spiritual application is how we're going to respond to this situation as men of God.
There you go. And I like the way that you said spiritual application as well. Reminded me of the priest or the officiant in Spaceballs. Remember at the marriage where he says, marriage is what brings us together today. So spiritual application is what brings us together today.
That is stolen from Madeline Kahn from Blazing Saddles when she goes up there. She goes, "Oh, a wed woes. How wonderful."
Oh, so Spaceballs was borrowing from Blazing Saddles.
Of course they were.
Oh, Mel, we expect you to be more original than that. But no, so here's my response, and mine is a little different than yours, but I hear all this talk about guilt, and my response is really, what guilt? Because at this point in my walk with God, I don't really experience that kind of guilt. I don't even experience that guilt when I do what I should not do, when I sin or fail to do what is right. And I believe that's based in large part on the fact that a walk with God is indeed a walk with God. It's not a religion. So
right.
you have a religion that's anytime you do anything on a set schedule, it becomes religious or at least quasi-religious. So if you ask me, do you go to church religiously? Well, yes, I do. Do you read your Bible religiously? Yes, I do. Do you pray religiously? Yes, I do. But above and beyond that religion, there is what I call the faith. And that's why, I don't like to use the term religious to describe myself. I describe myself as being faithful. There is a religion in the faith. I think there are several religions in the faith. I think there's a Catholic way, there's a Protestant way, there's a monastic way, there's an ascetic way, there is a the mystic way, all of which are widely different from each other. There's the scholarly way, etc., because we're all different. So there's going to be several different ways or religions, but above them all and the goal of them all is this thing that I call the faith. And the faith is simply being a child of God. So one of the things that you've just, you said, I'm not a good Catholic.
Right.
And I heard that. Now, when I was growing up, for us in the Protestant church, we had Sunday morning service. I may have said this before, but we had Sunday morning service with Sunday school, so 2 hours there. Sunday evening service, which was the worst thing in the world, and Wednesday night service. And if you were a quote-unquote good Christian, you came to all three of those. And if you were if you were a good Christian, you gave a 10% of your income to the church. And if you were a good Christian, there were several, and that whole concept was there of being a good Christian. Okay. Now let me ask you this: you're a father and a grandfather.
Yes.
Right. I'm a father as well. I've never once referred to my daughter as my good daughter. Have you ever referred to your children or your grandchildren as your good children or your grandchildren, or conversely as your bad children or your bad grandchildren?
Yeah, one of them's really, really good, and the other one is really, really bad. No. Nope. No, I haven't. I've always just referred to them as my kids.
Exactly. And sometimes they displease you.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, we're just having trouble getting our daughter to understand that school is where you behave. She doesn't want to behave. She wants to talk. She's smarter, than a kindergartner should be. It's boring to her, and she just decides to cut up. And almost every day, I'm getting calls from my wife, exacerbated. Nonetheless, I don't look at my daughter and say, "You're not my good daughter."
Yeah.
Right. She's my daughter. Mm-hmm. I'd like her to behave a little better, but I still love her completely and would give my life for her. Yesterday I laid down $2,200 for her tuition, because she goes to private school. That's where we want her to go. So I laid down that money, even though she's not behaving as well as I would like. My wife had called me up before I went to write that check. She's in trouble again. Okay. I still wrote the check. I don't regard her as my bad daughter. I believe it's the same with God. I mean, when you understand that what you have is a relationship with somebody who loves you. And of course, as we're recording this, it is Holy Week. This is the week leading up to Easter. Tomorrow, I'll have Maundy, Thursday service. Mm-hmm. Friday, I'll have Good Friday service. Sunday, we'll have Resurrection Sunday or Easter Sunday service, So we're coming into Holy Week. Well, Jesus said, I give up my life for you because I love you. I believe that. I don't think Scripture says this directly, but I believe it's true. God raised Jesus because he loved him and did not wish for him to remain dead. And when you see that God loves Jesus that way, well, you see what our family is. This is, of course, if anybody could be called a good child of God, it would be Jesus.
Right.
Nonetheless, that's not really the factor here. The factor is that God loved Jesus and said, "I don't want you to stay dead. Come out of the tomb." And Jesus came back to life. This is what our family is. This is who our Father is. This is his heart. This is how he functions. So even though there is religion, and religion, like any activity, has parameters and just like weight loss, just like weight gain, if you're a bodybuilder, just like athletic exercise, just like intellectual development, there are practices, there are regimens, there are structures to it. The point was never to keep the structures and thus earn the title of being good.
Right.
The point was to come to God. So, and at my development now in this life, where I have become, largely through being a father and through the things that God has revealed to me, over the past couple years, as I continue to read his Bible, continue to ask him for insight, I believe he reveals things to me. I've become very confident in that, to the point where there is no guilt for me. There's plenty of times where well, here's one of my favorite. Let me give you this description. So C.S. Lewis is one of my heroes, author of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
You mention him every show.
Yeah, you know what? I actually play a game where every Christian book I read, I try to see if they will quote C.S. Lewis, and I'm pretty much batting 1,000 on that. I mean, just about every. So it's hard to get away from C.S. Lewis in Western Christianity. But, and I may have even told this too, but he, in his autobiography, Surprised by Joy, he said, "I really don't spend a lot of time talking about sins that aren't temptations for me, because I don't think it's fair or whatever." I don't know exactly what he said. And then he said, "Of course, now I've opened myself for you to go look at what I have written about and say, oh, he must be tempted by this." And he says, "Yep, that's true. And more's the pity." That's I love the way he described it. More's the pity. It's too bad I'm tempted by that. It'd be better if I wasn't. However, he didn't regard that as an earth-shaking, relationship-shattering reality. He did say, "Gee, I'm a terrible Christian because," and I really, I've never made the effort to go back and find out what tempts him. I know he smoked his pipe enough that he turned the ceiling of his house yellow.
Wow.
But that's a lot of pipe tobacco, but him and his brother. But other than that, I don't know what temptations he might have faced.
Yeah.
He didn't seem to feel guilty about them, because he knew that while, there are things we should do and while there are things we shouldn't do, That's not what the faith is based on. The faith is based on the love of God, the acceptance of God. We respond to that hopefully in a righteous way, but that's not what determines whether we're good or bad.
What about something that came in my mind is the sentence, the God-fearing man. And what would that fall under? Would that be in association with a guilt type of scenario, or is that going to be something else where you're fearing the wrath of God over some kind of situation that you're either not supposed to be in, or something that you witness, like anger over war, or anger over an incredible amount of poverty, or something of that nature?
No, I like the phrase "the God for." In the Greek, it is the phobumenoi. You hear the word phobos in there,
yeah,
and the oi is a plural noun, I believe. So it's the God-fearers, right? The God-fearing man, the God-fearing woman. That could be misused in the ways that you described.
Okay.
But in reality, what does fear mean biblically? I believe what fear means biblically is a recognition of who God is and a respect for who God is. So it's more like an awe. The word awesome used to be the reverent fear of the Lord. Now we use it for a cool skateboarding trick,
Yeah.
But it used to be, when you have you regard the Lord as awesome, that is worthy of awe. So a God-fearer is one who recognizes who God is, respects God, who God is. They don't live in terror all the time. I don't think they live in guilt all the time. But I do so one of the things that I have learned in my life that I think the Lord – so I do believe the Lord interacts with us. When I say God told me something, I don't hear a big booming voice, an audio visual revelation. But when I read the scriptures, there are scriptures that jump out at me. When I go through life, there are things that happen that I believe the Spirit connects with scriptures, or the Spirit will take the scriptures, connect with my situations, and from them brings a word of God to me. So, one of the things that I believe that's been a word of God for me over the past couple years is you need to listen to me a little more. If you're familiar with the story of Joshua, when I forget who it was, that these people tricked him and tried to make a treaty with him. And it says Joshua did not inquire of the Lord. Okay. That's kind of what I was, I wasn't really inquiring of the Lord. I was thinking I knew it all and I could do it all, right? And was following my own voice, which was leading to predictable cataclysmic results. So as a God-fearer, when I hear that word from the Lord, I say, yes, Lord, you are God. I understand what you're telling me. I respect it. I accept it. I will follow it to the best of my ability. The opposite of that would not be, gee, I failed to do that, because I have failed to do that. The opposite of that would be me saying, I hear you, God, but don't really care.
See, that's not...
I know better. TED Talks told me this.
Yeah. That would neither be fear or guilt then. That would just be
that would just be rebellion.
Right.
Yeah. That would just, so the opposite of the fear of the Lord is not failure.
Right.
In fact, when I go to speak at my daughter's school chapel every month, and their theme this week is captive to calling, but free to fail. That is, God has called us to be a certain thing, and we want to try to be that. But God has also given us the freedom to fail, right? Mm-hmm. So we are going to fail. So the opposite of God-fearing is not failing, despite your best efforts. The opposite of God-fearing is not caring, is just rebelling, is just saying, no, God, I choose not to listen to you, and I choose to listen to TED Talks or to Richard Dawkins or to myself or to whoever. Again, what did we have in the Garden of Eden? The serpent comes in and tells Eve, oh, God said you're going to die, but you're not really going to die. You'll become like God himself. And she chose to listen to him and to her own desire rather than to listen to God. That's the opposite of God-fearing, not, gee, I'm doing the best I can, but a dirty word. There's some guy I listened to in a podcast. They were doing a movie podcast, and then they started doing a book podcast, and they had already expressed some Christian sentiment in the movie podcast.
Yeah.
Their first book podcast was a Christian author, which I thought was an odd choice. But the one guy, he thought he's trying to be snarky. He's like, well, what about a guy that cuts me off in traffic and he's got a Jesus sticker on his bumper and he gives me the finger? You know, he's trying to entrap this. The guy just said, yeah, he forgot who he was for the moment.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that he doesn't walk with God.
Right.
You know, so I have come to understand that this is not about performance. You know, it is about relationship. Now, I still do my best to perform because what I want to do, performance, I use this phrase that I call aligning with the right. You know, that God is the right. He is the standard of righteousness, this perfect white sheet. And I am trying my best to match that, to harmonize with that, because I feel the best that I can do in life, and which is a great thing, is to match the goodness and the righteousness of God. So my desire to do what is right does not come out of, gee, I got to do this or I'm going to feel guilty, because I won't feel guilty. I know the Lord will forgive me. I know the Lord will still love me. I know I'm still valued and still good, even if I would say, hey, I'm not going to read my Bible today. No, my desire is I want to align with the right. I am trying to match God, to be like God. Since I've been living that way the past couple of years, I don't have that. You know, I used to have guilt. Yeah, I developed my own daily devotion routine. I wake up, I read the scriptures, I recite a book by memory, and I pray. And I used to feel guilty when I didn't do that. You know, like God was now mad at me because I didn't do that. I don't feel that way anymore.
Right.
Those are disciplines that bring me to God. They're very important, but they're not what earns my approval from God. They're not what earns my acceptance from God. They're not what earns my salvation. They're not what determines if I'm good or bad. It's my relationship with God and my willingness to submit to Him and walk with Him that determines those things. So, yeah, come back to me on that a little bit.
Well, another thing too is I was thinking of two things. Now, growing up Catholic, and this pertains again to the Catholic guilt aspect. Growing up Catholic, there's a certain way that I pray. The prayers that I say, not the Lord's Prayer you say as well, the Our Father and all of them.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But the way that I pray was the way that I was taught in Catholic school. The route that I take, the way that I say the prayers, and even the Rosary, which is mainly a Catholic thing. I believe in those things, and I do those things. Once in a while, I'll do them, not as much as I'd like to. And when I say that sentence, not as much as I like to, that's the guilt part of it, that I wish I did it more often. Mm-hmm. And when I do it, I feel pretty good. And I think about that. I go back to the childhood. Mind you, it's also a nostalgic feeling because it was the 70s and right. The naivety of everything that I've learned over the years, drugs, sex, all that stuff was not known back then. And mm-hmm. So you look back on it on a fondness and you think about then till now, and there's that little guilt factor because of things that you've done since then. That you wish to go back to that pure and innocent time. And I think that's another reason why there is such a thing called Catholic guilt, because the un-Catholic way of living, which is something that all humans would do,
right,
can make you feel guilty, which, again, is another thing about, that's the rough part of being Catholic to me, is that it's just so much. But so that's number one. Number two is another reason that you don't have any problems with the guilt and stuff like that is that marvelous haircut.
The marvelous haircut creates guilt. The marvelous haircut makes me.
It gave me a furred laugh.
Why did I not tell her? Leave it a little longer than that, But what do you think, though, about what it's, you're saying, hey, I like to do the rosary and I feel good when I do it. I feel guilty when I don't. What do you think about this more's the pity way that I'm talking? I mean, the guilt way is one way.
Right.
But can you make the transition to say, instead of saying, hey, I didn't do the rosary today and therefore I'm a bad Catholic and I feel bad about myself, can you make the transition from that to, I didn't do the rosary today and more's the pity because that's a lost opportunity, but I'll do it tomorrow and God still loves me?
Yeah, you could. You really could.
Yeah.
It's more of a habit that you're just brought up with, and it's more of a habit than guilt, I think, just because of like my mother, all of my great aunts, my grandparents, all of them were very strict Catholic, and they brought you up in a certain way. And since it's different now, it's not really beating up yourself as much, but you're leaning into what they warned you about if you didn't do these things. And then you start to feel like, I should have listened to them and stuck with it more to make them proud or something. And there's that type of effect.
Well,
and go ahead.
Some of that is genuine. I mean, for example, I'm trying to get up to run a half marathon by the end of next month. But I just know, I mean, I've been running for so long now. I know that if I take 2 weeks off, I will lose something.
Right.
Okay. So there is a pressure per se of saying I have to maintain this discipline before I lose something. There is something similar in the walk with God. I mean,
exactly.
If I gave up, even today as I was running, the Bible memorization has become so hard. I don't know if it's because I'm tired or like the Far Side comic strip, my brain is full or, what have you. But it's become so hard. And there's a part of me that says, let's just not do it anymore. Let's make your mornings easier. Don't recite those books of the Bible anymore. But I know if I do, I will lose something. So there is a pressure there. But the pressure is growth, not acceptance, and that's different.
That's the part that's hard to differentiate.
Yeah,
sometimes.
I want to run a half marathon.
Mm-hmm.
Selfishly, pridefully, I want the 13.1 sticker for my car.
Just print one out. That's all.
Yeah, well, I know. No, nobody's going to check, right?
No, right. Who's going
to? But if I never do that, though, I can still be okay with myself.
Right.
And I do think it is, I think the Lord wants all of us to try to get his, to grow with him and come close to him. I think some people are just naturally going to do it more than others. I don't think he loves them, those that come closer more than he loves the others. I just, I think he would like us all to push ourselves a little bit. I don't think he's guilt tripping us though, because we don't.
No.
So,
it's like I said, it's more of a habit or a way that you were brought. It's the way that they plugged it into you, especially back in the 70s and 80s.
And that's my big question for you is where does this is this self-oriented or was this fostered upon you by the priests, the nuns?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
It's both. It's definitely both. And it's it's both been spoon-fed and then self-taken. And it's just sometimes it could be really exhausting, and other times you think it's such a ridiculous thing. You do have that more pity going on, where I'm just like, it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It just means that it's not the way it used to be, and things have changed now, and I still can have that same feeling by walking with God and talking with God, literally, like going outside, having a walk, and especially on a day like today, beautiful 70-degree day, sunny, blue skies, go outside and have that talk and walk with God. And still have that same feeling I had when I was following the quote-unquote rules of Catholicism back when I was young.
Right. What's really funny is how easily we can throw off this guilt when it comes to other people's religion, even if they're Christians, like I said. So, for example, the Amish. Are you familiar with the Amish?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so there are some Amish in Ohio. Mm-hmm. So we were taught about them in high school, and I remember we watched some movie in 7th grade, government class or civics class, whatever, and it was an Amish guy who had left. Quite a few of them leave, but they just have a lot of kids, so they can spare a few, But he said, we were taught to pray in German. And you were not allowed to not because they're of German descent, like the Pennsylvania Dutch, et cetera. They speak like a German dialect.
That's my grandparents, by the way, Pennsylvania Dutch.
Oh, really?
Very.
How did they move into Catholicism?
They were actually more Lutheran, but the grandparents on my mom's side, very, very Catholic.
There you go. But so he said he said, when I left the Amish church, I didn't leave God. I just left the Amish. And he said that first time I prayed in English, was so I thought lightning was going to strike me, because I'm praying in English rather than German. And knows how easily you and I can look at that and say, but that's not what God cares about.
No, he doesn't. I even have a German Bible, as a matter of fact, from my grandmother on my dad's side. Yeah.
Is it a Gutenberg?
It's something of that nature. No, I don't think he was in it. I think either Tom Selleck or who's the other? No, I have no clue. I do know that reading it, it's German language. It's just so. And peace to you as well, my son. It's just weird. It's weird, but I'm German, so.
Not to alienate any listeners, but I've always said everything said in German sounds like a dirty sexual innuendo. It just, but sprechen Sie Deutsch, eh?
My grandmother would run around the house and verdammt, it's a Donnerwetter, and yell at me. Ich bin ein and that's all we would grow up with. And I'm like, what in the world? And my dad would argue back, and then I'm like, what are you guys yelling about? Oh, we're deciding what we're having for dinner. And I was like, good God. I was behind the couch with an M40. Yeah.
This is why we get bad reviews on the internet.
I'm so sorry. That's my fault.
No, it's not your fault too. I'm happy to dive down the rabbit trail with you. But the point is this: we look at that guy and we so easily say, "You don't have to pray in German."
No.
It just the Lord loves you if you pray in English. We all easily accept that. Yet when it comes to me and my morning devotion structure that I set up for myself, or you and the Catholic ways that were passed down to you, those we tend to allow to make us feel guilty. And my contention is that this is never what the Lord intended. That Jesus said, "I will set you free." Mm-hmm. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Jesus believed that a walk with Him gave freedom, gave life, gave hope, gave joy. And in fact, it's when the Galatians slip back into religion that Paul says to them, "What has happened to all your joy?" Mm-hmm. So I understand it can be a very real thing for us, but I also believe it's not what the Lord wants from us, for us, that we actually can have a walk with Him that is not guilt-based, that has no guilt in it at all, that's based on forgiveness and acceptance and love and, tolerance and patience with us. So I get a little, I don't want to use the word offended, but when I hear, people that I assume probably don't walk with God, tossing out terms like Catholic guilt, Jewish guilt, Protestant guilt, et cetera, my contention is, man, you really don't know what it is that I'm doing. Yeah. You don't know the joy, the hope, the peace, the goodness that I find in my walk with God. There is no guilt in me. There is a belief that I'm forgiven, that I'm accepted, that I'm loved. And, I hope that all those who erroneously suffer from this guilt, as we apparently really do, I hope they will come to see it that way as well.
Definitely. Which leads us to the moral of the show. And now, the moral of the show. Well, the bottom line for me is, I have to, it's almost like an untraining, something that helps, actually something that doesn't help, I should say, which is kind of weird for the moral of the show, but is going to church now or again, watching it on Catholic TV, how much it's changed. And sometimes it changes as if, because I'm Catholic, so I'm supposed to get a note in the mail when they decide to change the way the church is done. And there's a comedian, as a matter of fact, Mr. Maloney, I think his name is, Robert Maloney. He says, it used to be that when you went to church, the priest would say, "Peace be with you. And also with you," is what the crowd would say. Well, now they go, "And with your spirit." And I'm the only fool saying, "And also with you." And I feel like that. I feel like an idiot because it's like, when did they change that? Because I'm saying 1970. I think I spoke about this before. And so it doesn't really lead to guilt, but it makes you feel like, geez, why did we go and change that? What was the point? And I was now to the moral of the show point of this conversation part. or this part of the conversation. I was talking to a friend of mine at Newfield Towers, elderly woman, very sweet lady. She's like my third mom. And she asked me, she says, have you been confirmed Catholic yet? I'm like batting 0 for 100 with the hamina. I did, and then I fell, and therefore I have not. And she's she's like, yeah. She goes, why? And I said, I don't think I want to be confirmed Catholic because of the fact that I can do my belief and my love without having to follow the rules of a religion like Catholicism, but still respect the Catholicism because I grew up with it and have a very strong fondness for it. And she completely agreed with me. And she's a strong Catholic person. She really is. But she understood that. That made sense to her. And she says, I completely understand. Because I told her, I said, I don't like the way the church is, kept changing the way it's said just to make it more pleasing aesthetically for everybody who goes to church. I don't think God would care which way you said this, that, or the other. The words that would respond to the priest, I think it's fine as long as you are respecting, loving, and accepting that Jesus is here for you and that God put you on the planet because he wanted you to enjoy the gift of what you have, which is life. And there isn't a need for the guilt or the road that you take can be a personal one and not a pre-mapped setup. You know what I mean? And that's something that I think is the moral for me, is that you don't need to harbor all of that just because even though you grew up a certain way, if your commitment to God and your connection with God is strong enough, you wouldn't have to worry about all of the rest of the frills and the side notes.
I think what you're saying is that your relationship with God is one thing, and the religion you use to try to develop that relationship with God is another. And the relationship should trump the religion. The religion
exactly.
Yeah, should not be the base of ugly, hurtful feelings like guilt and shame, etc. So, and I would completely agree. I mean, I'm the kind of guy that have whatever religion you want, because I look at the mystics. They seem so strange to me, and yet they did beautiful things and had beautiful thoughts about God and wrote beautiful things about God. It's not my way,
right?
But I'm not going to criticize it because apparently it was for them. I'm going to realize that there is a relationship above religion, and I'm always going to encourage people to pursue that. So that's the way I would restate your moral of the show, because we know I do stuff like that. So
I appreciate it because I'm not very good at getting straight to my point. I have to
see. You're coming back to guilt again, my son.
No guilt about it. That's all MS. That's not my fault.
Oh, okay. I will state my moral of the show this way. I'm going to try to paraphrase the Matrix here. Okay, so I'm the creepy little kid from the Matrix. Imagine my hair is even shorter than it is now, that it's non-existent, and I'm a little bald boy. And I'm going to say, don't try to eliminate the guilt. That would be impossible. Only try to remember the truth. There is no guilt.
Now,
you were supposed to say, what is the truth? That was Keanu's line.
What is the truth?
Yep. There you go. There is no guilt. So, whoa.
Bend the spoon now, because that was really cool a minute ago.
I say that all. My wife's like, we're in the kitchen. She's like, can you hand me a spoon? There is no spoon. You can't help it,
I know.
But in reality, the Lord does, we have acknowledged that this guilt is a real thing because of who we are as fallen creatures. It's not what the Lord wants for us, though. So it is possible to have a walk with God that is not guilt-based. In fact, I think the walk with God, the relationship with God, being a disciple, following Jesus, whatever your terminology, living the faith, whatever your terminology for this thing is, that does not have guilt in it. God never intended it to be a guilt-based approach to him. He intended us to have freedom, life, joy, light, hope, etc. And I think we're going to learn that in the future. And the more we learn that and the more we live that as followers of Christ in the future, the better representatives of Christ will be. That's my moral of the show. There is no guilt. We have been forgiven.
The jury finds us not guilty.
There you go.
Hey, what is some of the feedback, really quick, if you could snap some out?
Yeah, so from our last episode, we did finally get some feedback. But besides the comment we got calling me a false teacher on the website, we got a voicemail, like 2 voicemails, I guess, or 1 voicemail broken in half.
Yeah.
Who was that fella?
Mr. Keith Heltzley.
Yeah, Keith. And so he said he experiences some of the same. Is he a pastor or he's a?
I think he is a pastor as well. Him and his wife do some preaching at a church.
Yeah, he's got a show. He's got a spiritual podcast, Christian podcast.
Yes.
And he said, hey, sometimes I get feedback like that, and he gave us some advice for that, and that's good. Also, I see robots. That's what I call. He told me I can call him Brian, but he voxed me, and
cool.
Let me know. Hey, don't let these people get you down, and I appreciate that as well. Yeah, so appreciate the good words and
peace and chicken grease, dude. That's him. He always says that. Peace and chicken grease, dude. He always
peace
says
and chicken
that.
grease.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
There you go.
Favorite Brian saying. Well, that's good. I'm glad that you got those 2. On the note of Keith Heltzley, Retro Radio. What is it?
retro-otr.com.
I think is his website, and please go check it out too if you want to hear some good preaching and some good old time radio shows.
Okay, so does he have his preaching ones or his spiritual ones on the same feed as
I think it's on the same page. You can connect to it. I'm not sure.
Okay,
but yes.
So, but I mean, we always appreciate it when somebody takes their time to give us good words like that. We'd love some reviews on iTunes to push us up, the 5-star variety. So that would help as well.
Please,
but I did appreciate Brian, appreciate Keith getting in touch with us. And
Toys R Us report for Brian.
ICRobots.com.
Yeah. So, and then he does he talks about the Marvel Universe, which, man, I just, when I was a kid, that was so,
That was you?
Oh, yeah. The handbook of the Marvel Universe came out, and we used to study, they gave, scientific explanations for how Captain America's shield worked and all this stuff. I remember them saying, the Beetle had 5 layers of armor, and, Spider-Man would punch him, but it'd only penetrate 3 or whatever. It's just all that stuff. So I love all that stuff. So that's fun. But really do appreciate the feedback, and always welcome more.
Please, yeah. Give us emails either instrumentally@gmail.com or on the website, Serbonator.wordpress.com, McCoycast.wordpress.com.
Because I'm too cheap to buy the domain name.
Same as
me. I always say.
I would never do it.
At Douglas A. McCoy on Twitter. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the DouglasAMcCoy.com site. I wasn't too cheap to buy that one, where I have, some little articles, some podcasts, etc. My real life job. So you can check that out as well.
Definitely. Tonight's closing hymn.
But as we bring this to a close, Kevin, we always need a hymn. Every good service ends with a hymn, and this week it's your turn to bring that hymn.
Amish Paradise by Weird Al Yankovic.
Bum, bum, bum.
I can't remember the words, but I love it.
As I walk through the valley of the shadow of grain or something like that. I take a look at my wife and realize she's very plain.
Yeah, you got it.
I love that from Witness, by the way, when he's dressed up as an Amish man. He says, "How do I look?" And Kelly McGillis says, "You look plain."
I love Kingpin. That was a good movie as well. You ever see that?
I never saw it. No.
Woody Harrelson and now I'm forgetting all the actors. But he was an Amish bowler as well. They had an Amish bowler in there. It was a great movie, really a great movie. Oh, it totally slips out of my mind. I can't remember who the main character is. All right, so I'm picking the last closing hymn. Write in and tell me the cast of. I could easily IMDb it right now, but I'm not going to bother. Okay. I'm going to pick the King of Glory. Easter's coming up. This is one that we used to sing on Easter and Christmas as well, but it's a favorite of mine when I was going to Catholic school and Catholic church, and it's one that I learned on the guitar. So
nice.
I used to jam out on it, and you can jam out on this one because it is quite a beat song. So here is that tune. So thank you again so much, Doug, for this. Thank you for waking me up spiritually and mentally. And join us next time when Doug says...
As I walk through the valley where I harvest my grain, I take a look at my wife and realize she's very plain, but that's just perfect for an Amish like me. You know I shun fancy things like electricity. At 4:30 in the morning, I'm milking cows. Jedediah's feed the chickens and Jacob plows. Fool.
The King of glory comes, the nation rejoices. Open the gates before him, lift up your voices. Who is the King of glory? How shall we call him? He is Emmanuel, the promised of ages. The King of glory comes, the nation rejoices. Open the gates before him, lift up your voices. In all of Galilee, in city or village, he goes among his people, curing their illness. The King of glory comes, the nation rejoices. Open the gates before him, lift up your voices. Sing then of David's son, our Savior and brother. In all of Galilee was never another. The nation rejoices. Open the gates before him, lift up your voices. He gave his life for us, the pledge of salvation. He took upon himself the sins of the nation. The King of glory comes, the nation rejoices. Open the gates before him, lift up your voices. He conquered sin and death, he truly has risen. And he will share with us his heavenly vision. The King of glory comes, the nation rejoices. Open the gates before him, lift up your voices. Lift up your voices.
All of Zerbinator's music and podcasts are under the Creative Commons license, which allows retelling and rebroadcasting as long as the author is notified and credited. For more great escape pods, please visit www.zerbinator.wordpress.com. If you would like to contact Zerbinatorland, you can send an email to instrumentally@gmail.com or give us a call at 571-408-ZERB or 9372.